There has been many a parody of the science fiction genre out there, but most of the time they aren't very good ones. But as I got into in my video on why parody movies are usually bad, which you can find a link in the description to, the same is true for most other genre parodies as well. Though the most famous sci-fi parody of all might just be Spaceballs, and that's simply because it's a spoof of Star Wars that's actually pretty good. But as that already proves, that's not to say that every movie that tries to be a riff on science fiction is doomed from the start. Because in addition to Spaceballs, there has proven to be a few diamonds in the rough, with another famous example of this being Galaxy Quest, a satire of all things Star Trek and the nature of its fandom. This movie was so well liked by fans of the long-running franchise that it's even considered by some to be an honorary entry in the Star Trek series. Now, the obvious question to ask here is, why is that? Why does Galaxy Quest work so well as a parody of an established franchise and the people who love it? And today, I'd like to try and answer that question to the best of my ability. And obviously there will be spoilers for Galaxy Quest ahead, so in case you haven't seen it yet but would like to, you shouldn't proceed with this video. This will be the only spoiler warning I'll be giving out. Alright, so to start with a simple answer, one of the biggest reasons Galaxy Quest works really well is because it's not mean-spirited. Because as I spoke about at length in the aforementioned video, a huge problem parodies often have is that they're way too brutal in their takedowns of whatever it is they're parodying, usually not realizing that the audience is going to take offense to it rather than find it funny. Because after all, people don't like to watch something they love be mercilessly torn apart and mocked. Anybody with even a passing knowledge of human nature will tell you that's one of the easiest ways to get people to hate you, actually. But the point is, Galaxy Quest doesn't take this route, and instead is a lot more, shall we say, good-natured in the way it goes about riffing on Star Trek. Like them pointing out how Jason always loses his shirt in fights, which is an obvious knock on how Captain Kirk always lost his shirt because the executives noticed the female interest in William Shatner's chest, or Guy being convinced he's going to die as a send-up of the famous red shirts, or random background characters dying in order to raise the stakes while the main characters always survive. But that joke goes even deeper, because while Guy thinks he's a red shirt, he's actually a part of the core cast that'll never be killed. And many, many other jokes that only Star Trek fans will get. But the point here is, none of this riffing feels mean, or like it's trying to mock Star Trek for these things. Instead, it feels more like fun teasing, as friends might do to each other in reference to their individual quirks. In other words, it feels like the writers really do love Star Trek and are making the movie to poke fun at it, but at the same time be an ode to it. And this allows the audience to laugh with the movie because it just feels like a good-natured but respectful tease rather than something made to mock what they love. And not to mention, the fandom itself is actually put in a pretty good light in this movie. Because while many in the real world will often argue that people are just wasting their time getting so invested in fictional franchises, to the point that they argue over how to correctly pronounce Klingon or Vulcan words, or how fast hyperspeed actually goes, the thing is, it's still people's passion. I mean, sure, in the end none of it is real, but it encourages creativity in people and allows them to feel and experience things that they would never otherwise be able to. My point is, even if it doesn't seem obvious, loving a fictional story, any fictional story, does have its worth, and nobody should ever feel ashamed of it. And in the end, that is a major moral behind this movie. Because it shows that ultimately, it's the fans that make it all worthwhile. They are the ones that make fictional stories real. And this is best shown with the Thermians themselves, as even though they didn't know it, they were the biggest of all the show's fans. To them, the whole thing was absolutely 100% real, and it inspired them to not only expand their travel, but fight against their alien oppressors. And once again, even if it's obviously to a lesser extent than that, fictional stories can inspire people to do the same in real life, to go out and live their dreams no matter what they are or how impossible it may seem, or at the very least be able to live out their dreams through those stories. Or how one obsessed, stereotypically nerdy fan is told off by Jason, who's going through an existential crisis, for believing and treating the whole thing as real, which he naturally takes very seriously. But then at the end of the movie, said fan is encouraged to embrace his love and belief in it all, and even plays a pretty big role in helping them save the day, all because he knew every last detail of the show. To put it another way, any other movie would have probably had him, except that it's all fictional, and that he shouldn't be so obsessed with it. But here, nerds and fans everywhere, through this one character, are encouraged to embrace what they love full throttle, no matter what it is, even if it's partially played for laughs. But as I touched on before, some would argue that being so obsessed with something of that nature is creepy and unhealthy, and for those who take it too far, that is certainly true. But the thing is, most fans don't. Sure, they may be completely obsessed with it, but not to the point that they let it run their whole lives, and instead treat it more as an intense hobby. And that's who the movie is speaking to. It's saying to all the nerds and fans of fictional stories out there that it's okay to have a passion for that, and that there is value in the knowledge they acquire because of it, even if it's not obvious at first. Really, is there any wonder why fans of Star Trek and science fiction in general love this movie so much? But what's also interesting to note is, the same applies just as much, if not arguably even more so, to the cast behind those stories as well. Because at the start, most of the actors feel that their careers have amounted to nothing and hate being associated with the show, secretly rolling their eyes at their countless fans. And Jason, one of the only people to appreciate it all, is sent into depression when he overhears people mocking him and saying that nobody really cares about him or the show. Now, obviously part of the reason for this is because the movie is satirizing, and somewhat exaggerating, what happened to the actual Star Trek cast after the show was over, up to and including William Shatner reevaluating his life after overhearing fans mocking him. But the thing is, it also ends up showing that these actors amounted to a lot more than what they initially believed. Because, as I touched on before, after encountering the Thermians, they come to see just how much they inspired these people. That they are literally worshipped and the heroes of an entire alien civilization with the best of intentions, and yet are being slaughtered by an absolutely brutal dictator. And in the end, this not only inspires all of the actors to become the legends that they played on screen, but to appreciate all of the people on both Earth and beyond who love them for who they played and what they did on the show. My point is, Though obviously exaggerated for the sake of the story, this movie still does show that the actors who played roles and stuff with huge fan bases do have worth and deserve the praise and recognition they get. Even if said franchise ended up hurting their careers, they still did something extremely worthwhile by being a part of it and helping to inspire their many fans. In the end, this movie is basically a love letter to the cast of Star Trek and other shows and movies like it, showing that even if nobody else does, the fans will always love them and that they did something truly invaluable by being a part of it. But even if you want to disregard all of that, another, more conventional reason Galaxy Quest is so good is because it actually tells its own story. Rather than retelling or lampooning a Star Trek plotline or some other kind of science fiction story, this movie instead introduces a very interesting setup. What if the cast of a science fiction TV show were abducted by aliens that believed it all to be real and expected them to be able to do everything that they could do on the show? And they actually managed to tell a pretty good and compelling story with that setup. Because while they clearly took heavy inspiration from Star Trek, they still managed to tell their own story with the whole thing while poking light fun at the aforementioned series really effectively. To put it simply, this movie has a lot of elements found in conventional stories that most other parodies don't have, but should. It's got an interesting and unique plot, a main character who goes from being a jerk to rediscovering his worth and becoming the hero he had played on screen, an important lesson about the value of fandom, and a truly horrible bad guy. Seriously, Saris feels like a villain ripped straight out of a horror movie, and is all the more terrifying and abhorrent because of it. One does not quickly forget him. So in the end, there are honestly a lot of reasons why Galaxy Quest is considered one of the greatest parodies of all time, especially in the science fiction genre. But once again, I do believe one of the most important aspects to it is in the way it treats both Star Trek and its fans. Because as I noted before, mocking something people love, even when there is something to mock about it, is usually seen in very bad taste, especially when said mockery is way too brutal. But here, the parody aspect is meant to be all in good fun, and actually encourages fans to keep loving whatever it is they love rather than make them feel stupid for it. And the same goes for the cast behind it as well. So as a result, it's a movie that fans can not only get behind, but love right alongside their respective franchise. And that is something most other parodies can most definitely not lay claim to when it comes to how fan bases feel about whatever it is they're parodying. Okay, I think that's all I've got on that. So now I'd like all of you to tell me, do you believe one of the biggest reasons that Galaxy Quest is so beloved by fans of Star Trek and science fiction in general is because it's ultimately a good-natured parody that respects everybody? Or do you believe it's for different reasons that people like it so much? Please feel free to let me know in the comments below. But remember, you don't have to agree with any opinions expressed in this video. You can feel however you want to about Galaxy Quest or any other topic we discuss here, and I nor anybody else can tell you you're wrong. And thank you all for watching. It's really greatly appreciated, and I hope to see you all next time.